This is part 2 of telling you the story of the woman who mysteriously vanished from her hotel and showed up 3 hours later in the Everglades, and she doesn't remember a thing. So we are now talking about her private investigator, Ken Brennan, who has eliminated every single person on the security footage except for one guy, and he is convinced that this is the guy. The problem is the guy that he is looking at is carrying a suitcase, and he is looking so calm. He is looking cool and collected. If you had just raped and assaulted someone, most people aren't looking this calm. Like, they're sweaty, they're stressed. This guy looks like he is just about to go out for a nice little stroll of the day, and he's dragging the suitcase behind him like it weighs nothing. And yes, and granted, she was a small girl, and he is a huge guy. Like, he's 300 pounds, 6'4", like, he's a big guy. So something like, oh, a small woman's body wouldn't be the end of the world for him to drag behind him, but a body in a suitcase would still be a little bit heavy. And when he's first looking at the suitcase, he's like, I don't know that this suitcase would be big enough for her to fit in. But he figures out the dimensions of the suitcase based off of the video, and they test it out, and it turns out that she could have fit in it. He comes back without the suitcase 2 hours later. If you were just traveling by yourself, you wouldn't leave the hotel with a suitcase and then come back 2 hours later without your suitcase. That's weird. And the thing that Ken Brennan notices on the camera that is really the nail in the coffin, he knows this is the guy. He is pulling the suitcase off the elevator. This whole time, the guy made it seem like this suitcase was super light and he was just going for a stroll. But when he pulls the suitcase off the elevator, the wheels get kind of stuck between the elevator and the floor. And if it was light, it would just go right over that little gap in the floor. But if it's heavy, the wheel would kind of sink down into it and you'd have to tug it. And you see the guy, it's subtle, but you see him kind of struggle to tug the suitcase out of the elevator. So he's like, that suitcase isn't light, that thing is heavy. Now Ken is convinced, and he takes this to the detective Alan and says, I know that this is the guy. And Alan's coworkers are around, he's telling everyone about this, and they just kind of laugh him off. Alan is like, look, I don't think this is enough proof, I don't think this is right, and all the other coworkers just scoff at him, and they say, yeah, right, buddy. So he's kind of hit a dead end. Because Ken isn't actually a cop, he's just a private investigator, he can't actually act on anything. So he can't go get a warrant or go interview this guy. Like, there's nothing he can really do. But this guy, Ken, he is determined, and he is set that this is the guy. And one thing about Ken is apparently he does not give up. So he decides to keep looking at the footage. He starts tracking this guy's, like, day-to-day activity from the days before, and he sees him walking out the door towards a restaurant one day in the security footage. So he goes to the restaurant and gets security footage from them. And at one point you can see on his t-shirt that it has letters on it. He blows the footage up and figures out the words on the t-shirt is Verado. And at first he doesn't know what that means. He's not sure what that could possibly mean. Is it another language? He doesn't know. And at first he's worried this could be a dead end. But he goes to Google and he searches the word, and it turns out it is an engine manufactured by Mercury Marine, and this is an engine for boats. And in February in Miami, there was a huge boat convention. So he goes and gets in contact with the people that ran the convention and asks who could have these t-shirts. And they say pretty much anyone who attended. So he's like, crap, that doesn't narrow it down. Months go by. He is meticulously looking over this footage. He is not giving up. The police have since moved on. And Ken is he is determined. He starts talking to contacts, trying to figure out if anyone knows this guy. Finally, through connections, he gets a name. It is Mike Jones. It's good news that he has a name, but the problem is Mike Jones is a very common name. There are probably 100 Mike Jones within that little area. So now, how is he going to narrow it down? So he gets access to the hotel logs and sees that Mike Jones had checked in February 14th, which was 7 days before the attack, and checked out February 22nd, which was the day after she was assaulted and the day after she was found. He gets access to the information of the card that was used on his account, and it was Michael Lee Jones. There was an address for West Virginia, but it turns out that he had been not in that address for years, and the card was no longer used. It had been canceled. But when he looked at the phone number that this Mike guy had left, it was under a business called Centerplate. And Centerplate is a hospitality and food service job. So this is something that if he worked there, it could be making him travel all over. And this could be the reason why this guy is so confident and calm after just raping and assaulting a woman. So he looks into the company's center plate and discovers that he no longer works there, but he's like, he probably went to a competitor. So he looks at all the competitors in the area and gets 25 different businesses, and he calls every single one of them and says, hey, does this guy work for you? And all of them are happy to answer questions, and they're like, nope, that guy doesn't work for us. Is there anything else you need? Except for one company. And when he calls them, they say, get a subpoena and don't answer anything else. So Ken is like, yeah, that's the place. I know this is where he works. So he calls the detective and says, I've got a name. It is Mike Lee Jones. Come get him. So the detective doesn't know if he fully believes him, but he's like, you know what? This guy's done a lot of work. He's very confident. I'm going to at least humor him and go check it out. The detective and his partner go to check out Mike Lee Jones. So when he gets to where Mike is just sitting outside grilling. He seems cool and calm and collected. So they just start having a casual conversation. And he asks him if he had been to Miami anytime soon. He says yes. He said he stayed at that hotel, and he answers what they already knew. And then he asks if he had any sexual relationships with anyone while he was there. And Mike says, yeah, I slept with a German woman. He says, though, that it's consensual, because when the detective asks him if he raped anyone, he says, no, absolutely not, and acts appropriately surprised. Even though he's not convinced at this point that it's Mike, he gets some DNA and tests it against the DNA found on the victim when she was discovered. And turns out it matched. So the detective immediately calls the PI and is like, oh my God, you were right. I can't believe it. This is the guy, and we have to get him. So they arrest him, and he denies it, but he has a story. But eventually in the interrogation, they finally get his story to kind of crack, and he ends up making a plea deal. He is sentenced to 2 years, only 2 years, for a woman beating her, putting her in a suitcase, and leaving her for dead in the Everglades. 2 years, that's it. So the PI is pissed. He is like, that's not good enough. And so he goes back and looks at records, and using FBI records, he looks at DNA and finds 3 other unsolved cases that match his DNA. And all I have to say is, if I ever have something happen to me, I want Ken Brennan to be my PI, because holy crap, this dude is committed and he does an amazing job. Of the 3 cases, 2 were in New Orleans and 1 was in Colorado. And one of them in New Orleans is able to give a very positive ID, and between that and the DNA, he is sentenced for 24 years to life for one of them and 12 to life for the other. Mike was 38 when he was charged. He won't have a possibility of parole till 2032, and because he's a repeat offender, he probably will never get out.